Well, this week the Twitter sphere yet again grabbed the headlines with British MP Diane Abbott's colonial comments leading to Ed Miliband's Blackbusters gaffe today, and Linda Martin and Wendy Deng, while their fake Twitter accounts also caused a bit of a stir. It's transforming, Twitter is transforming the way we communicate, but it seems Twitter can also land you in hot water. Here to discuss the issue with us, I'm joined in the studio by Stephen O'Leary of O'Leary Analytics. Welcome to the programme, Stephen.
Thanks very much.
Talk to us about some of the recent problems that have been caused by Twitter.
Yeah, the last 24 or 48 hours have been extremely interesting, especially in the UK. And I think Diane Abbott's case, I mean, she's the Labour Shadow Health Minister, and anyone in a position like that, anyone with a position of that kind of authority, just has to be more careful.
Yeah, just to tell people, she called...
the tweet in question said, "White people love playing divide and rule. We should not play their game." Now, when you take that out of context, as a single line, I mean, you know, obviously the word everyone is using at the moment is racist. That you can't make a comment of that like that and not be claimed to be racist.
If a footballer said that, he'd be sacked.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. And I think, you see, her argument initially was that it was taken out of context, that it's been blown out of proportion, and there's an element of that. But what people have got to remember is this occurred when she engaged in a conversation with somebody else on Twitter publicly, as you know, celebrities, politicians, people with public profiles are doing week in, week out, day in, day out, you know, usually without any harmful effects. But unfortunately, when heated debates happen, as did in this case, people sometimes forget that they're not texting somebody. This isn't our emailing. This isn't a private conversation. This is a public conversation, and everybody sees it. And I think in this case, it's definitely been a harsh lesson, but hopefully we will see less politicians in the future make gaffes like this.
Yeah, and I gather she got a dressing down from her party leader, Labour Party leader, Ed Miliband, and then early this afternoon, he was paying tribute to Blockbusters host Bob Holness, who we've already referred to, typing, "Sad to hear that Bob Holness has died. A generation will remember him fondly from Blackbusters."
Yeah, this was this is the kind of stuff you just couldn't make up. I mean, you know, it's hard to believe that this happened. The tweet in question was deleted within minutes and obviously replaced.
It could just have been a typo, couldn't it?
It could have been, absolutely. You know, I mean, I suppose a lot of the commentators are saying that, you know, he obviously had this on his mind and was concerned about other things in the party.
I heard another tweet saying that Miliband obviously needed an O, Bob.
Yeah, we've you know, and this is the thing. You see, usually it's a topic like this, most of the, you know, the tweets around sort of the death of a celebrity tend to be quite serious and somber. But when something like this happens, it inevitably, I mean, Blackbusters is a trending topic on Twitter now. There's people around the world who will never have seen Blockbusters, won't know what the show is.
Could it be the tipping point against Miliband? Because he's had a disastrous week. And I mean, okay, it's not exactly the biggest crime ever to get a tweet, to spell something wrong in a tweet, but it does heap further pressure on a leader who's already struggling to maintain his credibility.
It's momentum, unfortunately. I mean, these are two very serious things that happen in the space of a week, and the problem is it keeps the story in the press. The story was probably dying out maybe around lunchtime today, but as soon as a tweet like this comes out, it's got more things. And you're going to see this talked about, you know, on radio shows, you're going to see it on news bulletins, and you're going to see it in newspapers over the days to come, unfortunately.
Do you think that everybody who's using Twitter needs to learn this lesson for themselves? Because every day we're seeing more and more people getting themselves into trouble, despite the fact that there's been so many well publicised incidents of exactly that. It's almost as if only until it happens to me, well, I won't really until that point pay much attention to it.
And this is it. I mean, unfortunately, people are treating it as a private medium when it's an extremely public medium. And when I talk to people, sometimes people come to me and say, you know, well, what's it okay to say and what's not okay to say on Twitter? And this is obviously a very personal thing. And I have friends who will use very choice language when they tweet and don't think twice about it. And I have others who are very, very careful. But in terms of advice, if you're in a professional position, especially one publicly, like Diane Abbott is,
like Joey Barton.
Like Joey Barton, exactly. Well, he's probably an exception to the rule. But quite simply, if the thing you're about to say in the tweet, or on Facebook, or on a blog, or wherever you're going to post it publicly, is something that you think your mother or father, your son or daughter, your brother or sister, or your grandparents would be in any way offended or upset about, don't write it. And if you stick to that rule, the chances are you won't go too far wrong. Now, your tweets mightn't be as interesting or engaging. You know, you mightn't have the same kind of personality that you would when you're having the chats with your friends down the pub. But this is the thing, you're not having the chats down the pub with your friends. It's a public forum and everything gets recorded. And this is what Miliband will have realised today, unfortunately. He deleted the tweet inside 2 minutes, but it was captured, there was screenshots, and everybody was talking about it. So it's not enough to say, whoops, I didn't mean it, because there's a record.
And Twitter has already had a big impact on Irish politics. I mean, we've effectively lost one cabinet minister because of Twitter, and it arguably changed the course of the presidential campaign on that night on the front line on the Monday night just before the presidential election.
Well, this is it. I mean, you know, and I suppose that brings up so many things in relation. I mean, one of the biggest problems, and we've seen this happen, another thing that happened during the week was to do with Wendy Deng, Rupert Murdoch's wife, and a fake account was set up in her name. Now, one of the ways Twitter verifies, and this is what we saw as a problem in the presidential election, an unverified tweet was talked about and was put in terms of a question to Sean Gallagher, and we saw what happened as a result. But to avoid situations like that, when it's a high profile person, Twitter will give a verified tick. So you see this tick next to somebody. So if you go on and you look up someone like, you know, I suppose any celebrity really, most times Twitter will have verified that the celebrity is who they say they are and it's not a fake account. And they did this in the case of Wendy Deng. They made a mistake. So they said she had a verified account, and she went on to engage with other celebrities online. Now, there was nothing offensive, but within a day it was clear that this wasn't Wendy Deng, that this was an imposter. And yet Twitter had made the mistake, and that's something they'll have to be increasingly careful of in the future, because it's definitely something that people look for when they're trying to authenticate an account.
That famous tweet that wasn't on the front line, was that something that was authenticated, or I suppose it wasn't a celebrity, it was coming from it's purportedly coming from the Martin McGuinness presidential campaign.
And we
there was
see
no such tweet account.
We see this happening, you know, again, I mean, we do an awful lot of analysis for clients, and quite often they will see a tweet appearing from somebody that they think is one person, and if you look closely at the username, there's an extra letter, there's an extra number, there's a different thing, and that was the case in the frontline tweet. There was a slight change, but the profile picture was the same, the tone would have been the same, and in some cases, you know, these accounts will put an awful lot of thought in advance into something like this, and will send out hundreds of quite normal looking tweets to make the account look normal. Actually, the Ronan O'Gara case was probably a very good one of that too.
What was that?
There was a tweet that came from an account that purported to be Ronan O'Gara's account, where he declared that he was retiring either before, after, or during the Rugby World Cup, and it was picked up. It was reported by, you know, several broadcasters. Loads of people retweeted and talked about it, and it took about half an hour or an hour for people to realise that this wasn't his unofficial account, that there was a slightly different number. Now, after all that, and having said all that, the one beauty of the medium, in terms of the way I look at it, is its ability to self-correct is incredible. And it happens so quickly. So it's not like waiting for a retraction. It's not like waiting for a correction that you maybe have to wait 24 hours.
Hang on,
As I've used myself a couple of times, there was a couple of instances where there was an embargo involved, and I really shouldn't have been tweeting at all. And thankfully, within 1.5 seconds, I was able to hit the delete button.
The damage can be done by the time the clarification comes out. I mean, for example, the presidential debate. Okay, we found out the next day that it wasn't from Martin McGuinness, but I mean, that was too late for Sean Gallagher.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as you click send, there are issues. It's more, I suppose, to do with when the person who's writing it has made a mistake. So if it's, we'll say, a fake account, or if the individual maybe has said something they shouldn't have done, or they want to, I mean, you know, earlier this year, Kenneth Cole, when the uprising was happening in Egypt, you know, there was this incredible situation where they published
the designer, fashion label,
the fashion label, and from their official account, the tweet was, "Millions are in uproar in Cairo. Rumour is they heard our new spring collection is now available online." And
in bad taste.
I mean, you know, taste. It's so beyond what anyone could justify writing it. It's hard to believe. And there was a huge backlash. And thankfully, the tweet was removed. The company issued an apology. You know, said that, you know, it wouldn't happen again, and that wasn't with their official policy in terms of things like this. And thankfully, things like that can be corrected very quickly. But again, the damage was probably done. I'm sure an awful lot of people maybe who would have, you know, it would have influenced purchasing decisions.
And how do we characterise what Sinead O'Connor did? I mean, probably one of the most personal things you can do, breaking up with your husband on Twitter.
Yeah, and yet that's a very voluntary thing. You know, I think some people choose to use social mediums, be that Twitter, Facebook, their own website, blogs, to publish very personal information. And we do see, unfortunately, you know, quite emotive topics being discussed. And sometimes I think maybe in hindsight, individuals maybe look back and say, maybe that wasn't the best way to go, or maybe I shouldn't. But you do have the opportunity now. And you're like, every person who's from a Z-list to an A-list celebrity, if they've got a Twitter account or a Facebook page, they don't need a radio station, they don't need a TV station, they don't need a newspaper. They have their own broadcast medium, and they can get the message out instantly. And
generally speaking, are people, you know, should they be a slight bit more reluctant to resort to the technology?
It's difficult. In some ways, I'd say absolutely not. I think it should be embraced. I think it's got the potential for good on Twitter is incredible. I mean, and social mediums as a whole, 99% of the things that happen, now a lot of it is mindless, you know, but
you do hear football managers, for example, and maybe managers of any team sport occasionally coming out and saying, I've encouraged my players not to get involved with Twitter because it's just something that's going to get them into trouble. And of course us in the media, particularly the sports media, immediately react with horror because quite a lot of the talking points we get are from Twitter.
Well, this is it, and I mean, like, and it's a great way to engage with fans. I mean, if you look at, professional golfers are probably a really good way of looking at that. I mean, if a sponsor is maybe making a decision as to a player they want to sponsor, and the individual has got a huge following on something like Twitter and engages with their fans and, you know, uses sensible language, but talks about things like maybe their club setup, maybe talks about how they're playing that week, you know, things like their diet, small little things that you would never get in an interview, that you would never get in an article, but are really interesting. You know, that's just one of a myriad of examples of where social media can be really, you know, it can be a great asset to people in the public eye.
A lot of text coming through on this. Stephen Carmel and Bray says, while I agree with you, you kind of love Twitter, and I think it's excellent for communicating with people. I could never hope to in any other way. I have some public figures who I admire and that I can talk to privately. How brill is that? And Colin, I suppose, borrowing agrees with you and saying the rule of thumb using Twitter: don't say anything on Twitter you wouldn't want your grandmother to read on a billboard in the centre of your local town or village with your photo, name, address and telephone number underneath. So that's not a bad rule of thumb.
No, that's probably a pretty good rule to apply.
Not sure it would have worked for Diane Abbott though, would it?
No, and I think hopefully out of this, politicians not only in the UK but around the world will look at this as another example of maybe when a fan or a follower or anybody engages with you on a social medium in a public space, be absolutely certain that you may feel you were only replying to this person, but if it is in a public arena, you were applying to the world, and the world has a record of it. So think carefully, is it the kind of thing that you would say on the 9 o'clock news or not?
Okay, thanks for that, Stephen. That was Stephen O'Leary of O'Leary Analytics.